So you're here for a reason, right? Well, I hope it's to go over freeCodeCamp's version of the Quiz website for accessibility. That's what we're going to be going over in this video. If you are new to this channel, my name is Rob. I'm a coding instructor for PreCodeCamp, and I'm going to be going through all of the steps in this module, in this workshop, and give you an instructor's point of view as if you are the class and we're all learning it together. Now, I haven't been through this module whatsoever, so you are seeing it for the first time as I'm seeing it for the first time as well. So if you could do something for us, it's something free. Go ahead and hit the like button. And if you are feeling a little jumpy, feel free to leave a comment in there. I love hearing where you are at in your learning experience so far and what have you found difficult, which is why you probably found this video. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started and see what we're going to be making. All right, so this is what we're going to be making. I don't know what is screen readable. I haven't looked at the code. I don't have a screen reader to test this out on, but this is the gist of what we'll be creating here. So it looks like just a standard form. You have a nav bar up here, logo, and some forms to fill out, and then a big old send button at the very end. So let's go ahead and dive into step number one. Okay, so step number one here, it says that we need to go ahead and make sure that the HTML tag knows that our language is going to be English. So we're going to come up here to the HTML. We're going to set the lang. We're going to set that to English. So that's going to be EN. And then down here, it says also remember to link the style sheet. And so I'm always telling everyone, hey, if you don't know how to do this, always look it up on W3 schools and you'll come to this over here. And this is what we want to do. We want to link our style sheet. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that, and then I'm going to come back over here, paste it, but I don't want to put it with my style.css. I need it to say styles.css in order to get this to work. Now, something that's interesting, I did ask freeCodeCamp, why do we not have any kind of like auto completion or anything like that when it comes to typing this out? Because in Visual Studio Code, all we would have to do is type the word LINK, hit the tab button, and all this stuff would auto-populate here for us. And they responded with, they did it that way on purpose, so that way as a beginner to go ahead and open and close your tags, and it doesn't give you any kind of auto help. So it's trying to force you to do everything by memory. And that's one of the drawbacks of this, because when we're in a live class, we definitely use Visual Studio Code, and you get so used to those keyboard shortcuts right away, right from the get-go, instead of having to memorize some of these things out right there. So anyways, let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're ready to move on to the next part here. Step number two, it says that you may be familiar with the meta element already. It's used to specify information about the page, such as a title, description, keywords, author. Go ahead and give your page a meta element with the character set value and make sure that it is UTF-8. And this just helps to know the browser what type of encoding that you're going to be utilizing in order for it to display all the characters properly on the page. So let's go ahead and add it. Right, so we're just going to go ahead and do the meta, and then we're going to do the char set, and then we want to set that to UTF-8. And this is another one of those void elements where it doesn't get a closing tag of meta. So let's go ahead and check our code. There we go. We're moving on to the next step here. Okay, so before we move on to this step number three here, I did want to point out that notice that we have these little trailing slashes on here, okay? And with the HTML5 browsers, most of them say that you can either keep them in or you don't need them. It will perform the same on the browser. However, if you are choosing it for readability purposes, for your own coding readability purposes, these are fine to put these trailing slashes in. I don't know if anybody noticed that I didn't put them in mine on the previous page, but when we hit the next button, it automatically put those in there for us. So I just wanted to address that before we moved on to this step number three. But step number three here says that we're going to go ahead and continue on and add a few more meta tags. And this time we want to utilize the viewport. And we want to make sure that the viewport has the definition with the content attribute detailing the width and the initial scale. And so again, this is going to be diving a little bit deeper into your knowledge base and notes that you might carry along with you. Is what is this viewport? What does it do? What does the syntax looks like? Because when we're utilizing this in Visual Studio Code, we just take it all for granted because there's a real quick keyboard shortcut to it. But if we do a real quick Google search for the viewport, this is what we come up with. And it says setting the viewport. HTML5 introduced this new method that allows web designers to take control over the viewport utilizing a meta tag. And here is an example of a meta tag that we would like to go ahead and use. And this tells the browser, gives it instructions on how to control the dimensions of the page. And so it says the page width here part sets the width of the page to the screen width. When we say this right here, we're saying, hey, use the entire canvas of the web page for the width. And as far as scaling, this part sets the initial zoom level of the page when it is first loaded. So anyways, let's go ahead and add this entire thing on here. Matter of fact, I'm just going to copy it and paste it into our project because that's exactly what we're using. And this all goes into the head section. It doesn't matter the order, but for readability purposes, you probably want to stack your metas together to keep them grouped. Let's go ahead and check our code here. And we got the congratulations. All right, let's move on to the next step here. All right, so step number 4 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it says, hey, let's go ahead and do another meta tag. This time we're going to have the name, we're going to set it to description, and then the content attribute, we're going to give it a description about this page. And this is what I am talking about when you are just learning things and going through the material, and take your time and kind of go into a little bit of the documentation, because one of the things that I'm always telling students to do is, hey, if I asked you, what does this tag do? Then you should be able to understand what does it do. And if you don't know, you should know where to look. And I'm always going to be referencing something like MDN Docs or W3 Schools. And in this case here, the meta tag here, we're looking at the examples up here where we have a meta tag with the name being description. And then over here is the content attribute. We're setting that equal to something as well. Keep that in mind that W3 School is out there to help us out. And down here, the way to read this is, here are the attributes that a meta tag can have. We're going to supply the name, and then we're going to supply the content. And we can also take a look at some examples here. Here's an example of the meta tag. Notice that W3 Schools did not put the slash in here, but we can either keep it or we don't need to keep it. Okay. So this is the one that we need here. Again, we're just having a meta tag. We have the attribute of name, we have the attribute of content on there, and we will tweak it to match what we need for our project here. So I'm just going to go right underneath the meta tag again. I'm just grouping these together. It really doesn't matter for the unit test purposes or the browser. It's more of readability. I'm going to keep description as description. And then here, this is where we can change this to maybe something like a quiz web page. I'm sure that later on when we hit this check your code, it's going to change it to something else, but it's just looking for us to have a value in it. So let's go ahead and check our code here. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. So step number 5 here, it tells us, let's go ahead and add a title. That one's a real easy one. It's also our very first non-void element that we have on this project so far. So we're just going to go ahead and do title. And I'm always in the practice of, if you have an opening tag, make a closing tag. Don't put anything inside of it. I see it all the time on the forums for freeCodeCamp, where it has people posting their code, and guess what's wrong? They forgot the closing tag. So always put it before you put some content in here. And it just says a descriptive title. And so I'm just going to put quiz webpage. Again, it's going to change in the next one. You can see that our description has already changed, and I'm not going to put a lot of thought or effort into it. So I'm just going to check the code here. It says that it needs to be at least 15 characters. Let's go ahead and add some more on here. We'll go ahead and do the accessibility here as well. Now let's go ahead and check the code. There we go. All right. Crazy little test, even though they're going to change it in the next step. Probably not necessary. All right, let's move on to the next step. Okay, so we're cruising right along here. Now, before we go to this next step, I always get some questions asked on, hey, do you know any meetups or any kind of coaching that might be going on that they would really like some sort of accountability partner? And the thing that I would recommend you all to do is take a look at the description. Somewhere in the description of this video, there'll be a link with the About Us, and usually we'll put special links on there, whether that be to Discord, whether that be to any kind of promotions that we are currently offering, will be in that About Us link that you see in the description. So make sure you check that out as well. So with step 6 here, it tells us that the navigation is a core part of the accessibility. It relies on you providing some semantic structure to your page. This is accomplished in the code here by utilizing these two elements that we want to use, which are a header element and a main element, and talks a little bit about what each one of those elements will do here for us. But what it's wanting us to do is have a header element, and then we also want to have a main element. And they're just going to be stacked on top of each other like a sandwich, right? Let's go ahead and add the closing main on there. I believe that is what it's asking for with this step here. Congratulations. We're moving on to the next step. So step number 7 in building a quiz web page for FreeCodeCamp, it tells us that within the header, provide some context with the page. And we're going to be nesting the image tag, an H1 tag, and then a nav element. And it talks about the image tag, what it wants to have inside of it. And it said it should also have an ID of logo. Alternate text should be FreeCodeCamp. And then an H1 should contain the HTML/quiz. I don't know if it's wanting us to include the nav element in here as well, or if that's going to be on the next step, because it didn't really specify to me on here, but I'm going to go ahead and include it. And if it doesn't need it, it's going to be removed. And later on, we'll put it in here. But let's go ahead and stack it the way that it wants us to. And so we're just going to do an image tag here. Now, an image tag, it is one of those that are self-closing, okay? It is a void element. What we want to put on here is the src, that is the source. And then we also want to have an ID on here, and we're going to set that equal to something. And then the last part here is the alt text. Now, the alt text is going to be used for the screen reader, and also if the image happens to be broken, it will show it up there as well. So let's go ahead and fill in the missing pieces. And I'm going to go ahead and put this one for the source. I'm going to go ahead and move over to the ID, and that needs to be logo. And then I have the alternate text here with FreeCodeCamp. So that should satisfy us for this part right here, okay? Anytime they put something very important that we are needing, it's going to be in the gray square here. So we don't have any freedom to put anything else in there. Next on the stack is the H1. Again, practicing that good closure on here. That's what I'm trying to make sure that you all do. And inside the H1, it needs to be the HTML, CSS, quiz, okay? Now, like I said, I don't know if it's looking for the nav to be in here. I can go ahead and put it in there and close it off. But like I said, I don't know if it needs it or not. So let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. All right, so step number 8, we're utilizing something on here that we haven't seen quite yet going through the FreeCodeCamp modules, which is a function. CSS can have functions, and with this right here, it's going to use whatever is larger. Okay, so in this case, that it gives us an example for the max, it takes 2 parameters, and it's going to say, hey, is 250 pixels bigger than the 25 VW? And if we read a little bit down below here, it talks about how does it get these values, or what does the 25 VW, when's it going to use the 250 in this example here? So it says in the above example, the width of the image will be 250 pixels if the viewport is less than 1000 pixels. So what does this mean? This means that if you think of a desktop browser and maybe you have a very large screen, that it's going to utilize the bigger viewport here instead of the 250 pixels right here, okay? So as we are shrinking the browser down, think about this as far as maybe a mobile phone, right? You want it to go down up into a point, but then you don't want it to get any smaller. So you just don't want to have a width of 25 VW slowly or solely on there. You want to have the CSS kind of pick between which one's bigger. Okay, when we're on a smaller screen, the 250 pixels is going to be bigger. So that's what we're doing here. And it says, scale the image that we just got done putting on here, which is the FreeCodeCamp. And it says, use the ID as the selector. And if we look at the HTML code, what did we use as the ID? We use something here called logo. So I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to utilize the logo part of this. So let me go ahead and scroll up for us. So I'm going to do logo, curly bracket. And then it says it wants us to use the width here, but it wants us to use that max function. And the first value that we want to put on here is rem. Actually, it really doesn't matter which one goes first, which one goes last. But the 10 rem, what does rem do? Rem is the root M, and by default, without changing it with CSS, the root M is 16 pixels. So we can think about that in the terms of pixels here. 10 times 16 is 160 pixels is what it's going to use. And what is it going to compare it to? Which one is larger between the two, 18 VW or the 10 rem? And how can we see this? I don't know if we can see this on the screen until we get a background color put in here. But if I go ahead and expand this desktop or expand this browser view a little bit to the left, you can see how it is continually to grow. It's on a continuous path of growth. But when we come down here and make it small, it is on a continuous shrinkage, but it only shrinks up to a certain point and then it doesn't go any smaller past that. And so that's where that 10 rem is coming into play. Okay, let's go ahead and check our code. Let me first put the semicolon in here and check our code. Congratulations, we're ready to move on to the next step. So step number 9 in building a quiz web page for freeCodeCamp, it says, as described in the freeCodeCamp style guide, the logo should retain the 35:4 aspect ratio. Now, I don't know if they changed this style guide, but I could find nowhere on here did it talk about the image and it needing to be that type of aspect ratio. But in order to pass the test, that's what we need to do. So I'm going to come down here. It says first change the background color to the following. So we'll do that. And I'm going to go ahead and copy this and paste it down there. So now we see that the freeCodeCamp on there. Next is I'm going to go ahead and add the padding. And we're going to set that to 0.4 rem all around. There we go. And then the next part on here, it says the aspect ratio. So we're just going to use that property here. And then we're going to set that to the 35/4. All right. So again, I don't know why we're doing the aspect ratio if the image is already like that to begin with. Now, I will tell you that I have another video on YouTube. I believe it's a YouTube short talking about utilizing this aspect ratio, especially when it comes to videos, or maybe you're making cards and you want them all to be the same type of aspect ratio for that image. So that is a very useful one that you might want to put in your toolbox there to know about, learn about, use. Okay. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations. We're moving on to step number 10. So step number 10, it says we need to target the header. So let's go ahead and do that. Header, I'm going to open up the curly brackets for it. And then it says, let's go ahead and make it the full width of the parent. So we'll do width 100 pixels or 100% rather. Next is the height. We're going to set that to 50 pixels. And then it wants us to do the background color. And I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste this color here. Next, it says it wants the display to utilize Flexbox. Now, this is a little trick that they're doing here on you, because what goes on the right side, notice we didn't get a gray box like we did for the other ones. So we're going to do display, and it's just flex. You can see that it collapsed the text here, and we can see a little bit of the HTML quiz that we had in there earlier, but we do have our image, and this is now collapsed up into a Flexbox. So cool. Let's go ahead and check our code. Congratulations, we're moving on to the next step. All right, so we went through the first 10 steps of this. Hopefully you learned something. And should we continue on with the rest of the steps? Let us know in the comments, because otherwise we might not make those videos. So anyways, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing, and we'll see you in the next video, whatever that might be. Take care.